Hey, welcome to Watch Candy. I am so excited to have you guys here today. This is a very special episode. Not only is this the second ever official watch review for the channel, but I am extra excited for today because the watches I have in for review are candy themed. So without further ado, let's jump right into my review for Markwell's Hard Candy Enamel watches. That's right, in for review today I have 5 watches from a brand called Markwell, making up the whole collection of their Hard Candy Enamel series, which yes, use genuine enamel dials. But before I jump in and talk about these insane dials, let's first go through some basic specs. Number 1, the case. The case is what they called their Telford case, which was heavily inspired by their owner John's grandfather's watch. It's got some really interesting angled structure, especially with those lugs, and a stellar degree of finishing across the board. In place of a bezel, you've got a concave, fully polished ring around the crystal, and vertical brushing along the side of the case. Like I said, the lugs are where this case design really make its mark, no pun intended, with their sharp angles and compact but impactful design. They do sport a brushed finish on the top and the sides, and then a beautiful polished chamfer that goes straight to a razor point. And I am a sucker for pointy watch designs. Moving on to the case back, you have a no-nonsense design, with a satiny sandblasted ring in the center sporting a brushed version of the Markwell logo, as well as the specs going around in a ring as is the traditional fashion, with the addition of Telford, which like I mentioned is the case design, and overall is quite basic, but in a really good way. The closed case back does hide the Miyota 9039 movement, but at this point for me, I don't really feel the need to have that on display. If you've been collecting watches for a while, especially watches in a certain price point, you probably already have or have had a few of these movements lying around, and you don't really need to see another one. Although I do typically prefer an exhibition case back, I really don't feel like this one is missing anything because it doesn't have it. Moving on to the crown, I really love this crown. It just does it for me. I'm not exactly sure what the official name of this style is. I really love how it's rounded on the edges. It makes gripping it and pulling it out for usage really easy compared to crowns that are just straight and boxy. This crown style opts for fewer and more intentional grooves, and overall creates a much more thoughtful, high-end feel. It doesn't feel like they just picked a crown from a catalog. A really interesting kind of cherry on top for this watch is the loomed logo on the crown. It's not something that you will really ever notice while you're wearing it because who looks straight down at the crown? But it's such a cool little idea. I just think it's cool and therefore I approve. The Telford case is an exceptionally wearable 37mm wide, which is a dimension you don't hear all the time, but it makes perfect sense because it's a little bit bigger than 36 and it's a little bit smaller than 38 and 39 and just hits that middle ground perfectly on the wrist. Even on my wrists. Including the boxed sapphire crystal, the watch is 10.35mm thick, which considering it has an automatic movement is pretty awesome. You have an epic strap monster 20mm lug width, so you can fit a huge variety of straps on there. And the case has a 43mm lug to lug, which again makes this super wearable for all wrist sizes. But enough about the basic stuff, let's talk about what makes these watches exceptional and delicious. And that's the dial! Again, genuine enamel dial in a mouth-watering array of colors, all inspired by different flavors of hard candy. To be specific, those would be black cherry with red, lemon drop for yellow, grape jelly for purple, green apple for green, of course, and my personal favorite, blue raz. Getting more into the structure and design of that dial, what's really striking right off the bat is of course those Lumiblock indexes, which do indeed glow, and you can see 12, 3, 6, and 9 are crafted in a really interesting typeface with razor sharp points every time there's a corner. I would like to point out the 12 index specifically because you can see that 3, 6, and 9 are created using two halves, let's say, of these blocks, But the 12 is interesting because the 1 and the 2 are made out of single halves that come together and make that index as a whole the same width as the others, which balance out the watch in a really subtle but impactful way. Of course, underneath 12 you have the Markwell logo, then you have a sector dial crosshair, which is really interesting and kind of fills up some of that empty space before you get to the text automatic underneath. As you can see on the yellow and green versions of this watch, the text and the crosshair are actually printed in black as opposed to the others, which are white. The handset is really interesting too. You have these partially skeletonized domed hands, which are of course filled with lume. And then the second hand has a color matched tip at the end with that lollipop, depending on which dial variation you go for. I also want to point out that these watches are available right now on the Markwell website for $492.15, which is an insanely low price for the package. I've had these watches for like a month now, so I've had a lot of opportunity to try on and accessorize the different colors. And while I thought that the purple one would be my favorite, I've actually landed on the blue Raz color. And that's really because the dial has a pretty blue fume effect where it starts as a light blue in the center and then gradually darkens out slightly as it radiates outward, which reminds me so much of H. Moser & Co., which is of course my favorite watch brand of all time. So yeah, the blue Raz has got me that way. The purple and red watches are really interesting because they have a darker fume. As you can see, you've got that pop of color in the center and then they fade to black along the edges. Markwell has done a really good job at capturing this hard candy aesthetic. I would also like to point out that the green apple color has also got a lot of attention from people that I know, even those who aren't into watches. So now we've talked about what I love about this watch, which is admittedly a lot. Let's talk about my critiques. These are things that I would mostly be looking to change if they decided to create a Hard Candy version 2. Starting out with the strap, the material with that FKM rubber is quite nice. I don't have an issue with the material, but I don't really resonate with the strap's design. I feel like it works, but it doesn't complement the watch as well as other strap options could. For example, I would go with something more like this, although the style is, like I said, totally passable. I do want to point out that for my 6¼ inch wrists, I have to cinch it up as small as it can possibly go, and it fits quite well like that. But if you have a wrist size of like 5¾ inches, it's not gonna fit ya. So I would have preferred maybe one other hole in there. I gotta say it, the white strap is just a no-go for me. Thankfully, with every watch, you can decide if you want on the black or the white strap, so it's definitely not the end of the world. But even though the white strap does go super well with some of those colors, I've noticed on these press samples that I've been handling that the strap has been rubbing against the case. It's just like a millimeter too close to where that case is, and because it rubs against the case, you've actually got some dark spots that are appearing in between those lugs. And although you still have that slight bit of rubbing on the black strap too, you don't see any of its effects because it's black, while the white straps look like they've been worn for years. I am a big fan of the buckle on the straps. I really like the wedge-shaped silhouette that it creates. However, I would have preferred a brushed buckle just because the buckle is one of the most abused places on a watch, so the buckles show scratches quite easily. The buckle also sports an engraved logo and Markwell text, which is cool, but I feel like the Markwell text is just a little too low. I would have liked if they just had done away with the logo and centered that text. Especially because of the polished nature of the case, the bottom of those letters just kind of disappear when you look at it. It pains me so much to say this, it really does, because I love those Lumiblock indexes, but they just don't glow very brightly. They're definitely there, especially when you go straight from a light to a dark setting, but they don't last and they're not exactly spotlights. My last critique is the movement. I don't know if it's these movements specifically on the press models, but you can definitely hear the rotor on all of the different colorways that I've got. It's not terribly loud, but it is noticeable as I'm kind of gesturing like this. But aside from these admittedly really small nitpicky critiques, I love these watches. You've got so many colors to choose from, the quality is insane, especially for just under 500 bucks. Getting a Miyota 9 series automatic movement, sapphire crystal, excellent case finishing, and of course a genuine enamel dial. It's just such an awesome package, and I just love how playful all these watches are. And yes, I know I'm a tiny bit biased because this channel is candy themed, but come on, these watches are objectively good. Markwell is a brand that traditionally has a little bit stronger vintage design cues, and that is all well and good, don't get me wrong. And their Masonic watches definitely don't do it for me. So it's super awesome to see a brand almost entirely pivot and create something that is so much fun. So what do you think? Do you think these watches are as delicious as I do? What color would you go for? Let me know all of these in the comments. I'd love to know your thoughts. I've had a ton of fun wearing these watches out and about, and I'm definitely considering snagging this blue one. Thank you so much for watching. It's so great to be back in the studio. I just got back from my trip to France. If you haven't seen the video where I talk about the watches that I bring, definitely check that out. Your viewership means so much to me. Subscribe to join Watch Candy. I would love to have you guys, and I will see you all next time.